Well, hello and welcome to the first Flesh and Blood Ultimate Pit Fight on the channel. So the Slavs have gotten into Flesh and Blood lately, so we decided to record a blitz match with some of our favorite heroes. We have Stanislav on Phi, the other Stanislav on Dash, and I'll be playing Dromai. And because of their effects, Phi starts the game with a Phoenix Flame in the grave, and Dash with an induction chamber on the field. And it looks like Dash has the first move. He pitches a red to put a steam counter on his Technoplasma pistol, and another one to put a steam counter on induction chamber, and pitches another one for... honestly I don't know what, I'm not really familiar with the mechanologist playstyle. He ends his turn placing a card in his arsenal, and then at instant speed I use my Glory Seeker head equipment. I pay 3 resources to destroy it and draw a card. And since I pitched 3 red cards to pay the resources, Dromai creates 3 Ash tokens. And at the end of the first turn, both Stanislav and I draw up to our intellect, and all the cards we pitched go to the bottom of our decks. At the start of my turn, I pitch a red card to play Invoke Yendurai. So because I pitched a red, I create an Ash token, and I use it right away to create a Dragon Ally Yendurai, which comes into play with an Endurance counter, meaning if he would take damage, I remove the counter instead. Next I use another Ash token to create a Dragon Ally Asvolai. I attack 5 with Asvolai, and when he attacks he deals 1 arcane damage to both my opponents. Phi takes both the 2 damage from Asvolai and 1 arcane damage, but Dash uses Arcane Barrier from Achilles' Accelerator, pitching a card to pay 1 resource. And since all my dragon attacks have go again, I attack Dash with Yendurai for 3 damage. They don't block and take all 3 damage. I put a card in my arsenal and end my turn, and all the pitched cards go to the bottom of the decks. Phi starts his turn by playing Rise from the Ashes, which boosts his next Draconic or Ninja attack by 3, and returns a Phoenix Flame from the grave to his hand. Next he attacks Dash with Mounting Anger, pitching a yellow card to pay 1 cost and has 1 floating. So he attacks for 7 damage. And Stanislav doesn't block and he takes 7 damage. And since Mounting Anger hit, he banishes a Phoenix Flame from his hand, and he can play this turn and it gains +1. He then breaks the Chain Link, and attacks Asvolai with Flame Call Awakening, which kills Asvolai. And since it hit, he can search his deck for a Phoenix Flame. He attacks Yendurai with Phoenix Flame to get rid of his Endurance counter, and he uses his Sash of Sandikai as an instant. Since he used a red card this turn, he gains 1 resource, and he uses 2 resources to attack Yendurai with Searing Ember Blade. It attacks for 3 damage, which is enough to get rid of Yendurai. And since Searing Ember Blade was Chain Link 3 or higher, it has go again, so he attacks me directly with the banished Phoenix Flame, which has 2 attack power. I use my Seeker's Leggings as an instant to prevent 1 of that damage, pitching a red card to pay the cost and getting an Ash token, and I also opt 1 card from the top of my deck, and I decide to put it on the bottom of my deck, and I take 1 damage. And that's the end of Stanislav's turn. At the start of his turn, Stanislav attacks me with a yellow Overloop, pitching a yellow 0 to 60 for cost, and he also boosts it to gain go again. I decide not to block and take all 4 damage, and since it hit, Overloop goes to the bottom of the deck. He then breaks the chain and attacks Stanislav with a blue zipper hit, pitching a blue combustible courier for cost having 2 floating, and he also boosts it to gain go again. Stanislav blocks all 3 damage, so he gets attacked again with the plasma piston for 2 damage, which he also blocks. And with Induction Chamber's effect, Stanislav removes a steam counter from it to give his piston go again. He breaks the chain to put a steam counter on the piston, and with his remaining floating resource puts a steam counter on Induction Chamber, and goes for another attack with his piston on me this time. I don't block and I take 2 damage, and with that Stanislav ends his turn. At the start of my turn I play Skittering Sands, turning 1 of my Ash tokens into Aether Ashwing, and giving it +3 attack for the turn. Then I play Burn Them All, an aura which deals 1 arcane damage once per turn when I attack with a dragon. I then destroy my Sash of Sandikai to gain 1 resource, and I use it to play Miragai. I attack 5 with Aether Ashwing for 4 damage, and 1 arcane damage to both opponents, which they both take, and Stanislav blocks 3 damage from Aether Ashwing, which means he takes 1 more. And I attack Dash with Miragai. Stanislav doesn't block, so he takes 2 damage. And at the start of my end phase I put one race counter on Burn Them All, and I have to banish a red card from my graveyard for every race counter on it, otherwise it is destroyed. And on his turn, with only one card left in hand, Stanislav just puts it in the arsenal and ends his turn. At the start of his turn, Stanislav attacks Miragai with a red high-speed impact, pitching a blue combustible courier so he has 2 floating. And with 4 damage that's enough to take Miragai out. And he also boosts it to gain go again. And since high-speed impact hit, the next attack he boosts this combat chain gains dominate. So he attacks me directly with a red 0 to 60 for 4 damage, of course boosting it so it has dominate. I use Oasis Respite, pitching an Ember Mode Sanipai for cost, and since it's red I gain an Ash token, and I prevent 4 damage that would be dealt to me, so I take 0. But since Stanislav has less life than me, I don't get a life. Stanislav uses one of his floating resources to put a steam counter on his piston, which breaks the chain. He attacks 5 for 2 damage with his piston, which Stanislav blocks. In the attack reaction, he uses Induction Chamber to have his piston gain go again. He uses his last floating resource to put another steam counter on his piston. He pitches a blue high-speed impact and with one resource puts a steam counter on the Induction Chamber. And he attacks 5 with his piston again. This time Stanislav doesn't block, so he takes 2 damage. And that's the end of his turn. At the start of my turn, I pitch Sigil of Solace, creating an Ash token and using it straight away to play Kyogloria. I attack Dash with Kyogloria for 4 damage, and if it hits I can take his Induction Chamber. And because of Burn Them All, both my opponents get 1 arcane damage. Stanislav blocks the 4 damage with Overloop from his hand and his Iron Rod Helm. Then I attack 5 with Aether Ashwing for 1 damage, which Stanislav doesn't block. And at the end of my turn I put another counter on Burn Them All, so I have to banish 2 cards from my graveyard. Stanislav attacks me with a red Lava Vein Loyalty, and I choose not to block, so I take 3 damage. And since it didn't have go again, that ends his turn. At the start of his turn, Stanislav attacks me with a red Zipper hit, pitching a yellow Zipper hit so he has 1 floating, and boosting it to gain go again. And once again I use Oasis Respite to prevent 4 of that damage, pitching a Sweeping Blow to pay the cost and create an Ash token. But since Zipper hit attacks for 5, I take 1 damage. And since it hit, he destroys his West of the First Fist to gain 2 resources, having 3 floating. He breaks the chain and uses one of those resources to attack 5 with another red Zipper hit. And he also boosts it to gain go again. Stanislav blocks 3 damage and takes 2 damage. He uses another one of his resources to put a steam counter on his piston, breaking the chain, and attacks Kyogloria with it, destroying it. He uses his Induction Chamber to give his piston go again, and uses his last loading resource to put another steam counter on it. And he attacks 5 again with his piston. Stanislav doesn't block, so he takes 2 damage. And with nothing else to do, Stanislav ends his turn. At the start of my turn, I pitch a Ravenous Rabon, creating an Ash token and using it to play Miragai. I attack Dash with Miragai, dealing 1 arcane damage to both my opponents, and Stanislav doesn't block, so he takes 2 damage. Then I attack 5 with Aether Ashwing, and Stanislav also doesn't block, so he takes 1 damage. I end my turn, put another counter on Burn Them All and banish 3 red cards from my graveyard. At the start of his turn, Stanislav is having a hard time deciding which one of us he likes least, so he rolls a die to see who he will attack, and the dice says he's going to attack the other Stanislav. Next he uses his head equipment, Heat Wave, to destroy it and give his Phoenix Flame +1 attack until the end of turn. Now those of you that know a thing or two about Flesh and Blood would think, hang on, Heat Wave is not a head equipment, it's an arms equipment. And you'd be right. But Stanislav didn't read the fine text, and judging purely by the picture, which has a head in it, he assumed it was a headpiece. And the rest of us just didn't bother to check it until now.
We realize we're fucking idiots.
So yeah, he uses Heat Wave and gets rid of his other arms equipment. He also plays the Red Rise from the Ashes to give his next Ninja or Draconic attacks +3 attack, and returns a Phoenix Flame from his graveyard to his hand. And he attacks Dash with the Phoenix Flame, which now has 4 attack. Stanislav blocks 3 damage and takes 1 damage. Next he pitches a blue Lava Vein Loyalty and attacks Dash with his Searing Ember Blade with 3 attack, leaving him with 1 floating resource. And Stanislav blocks all 3 damage. And now with Phi's effect, Since he controls 2 draconic chain links, Stanislav only pays 1 resource to return a phoenix flame from his graveyard to his hand, and attacks Dash with it for 1 damage, which Stanislav doesn't block. Finally, from his arsenal, Stanislav plays Lava Burst, and since it's chain link 4 or higher, it gets plus 3 attack, so it hits for 5 damage, which Stanislav blocks using his last 2 cards. He puts a card in his arsenal and ends his turn. And with no cards in his hand, Stanislav just ends his turn to draw another 4 cards. On my turn, I pitch a Dunebreaker Sanipai, creating an Ash token and using its red away to create Yendurai, and it gets an endurance counter when he enters the field. I attack 5 with Yendurai, dealing 1 arcane damage to both my opponents, but Stanislav pitches a card for Achilles Accelerator's Arcane Barrier to stop it, and the other Stanislav blocks Yendurai's attack and takes 1 arcane damage. Next I attack 5 with Miragai, and he blocks 1 damage with Iron Rod Legs and takes 1 damage. Next I attack Dash with Ether Ashwing, which Stanislav blocks, and I attack 5 with Dust Up with 4 attack. Stanislav blocks 2 damage and takes 2 damage, and since Dust Up hit, I turn an Ash token into an Ether Ashwing. And at the end of my turn, Burn Demon gets another counter, and I don't have enough red cards to banish, so it is destroyed. Stanislav attacks me with a red brand with Cinderclaw with 3 attack, and I block on 3 damage. Next he pitches a blue Ronin Renegade and attacks me with Searing Emberblade for 3 damage, which I don't block. And with his 1 floating resource, he uses Fire's effect to return a Phoenix Flame from his graveyard to his hand, and he attacks me with it for 1 damage. I use my Silken Form, pitching a card to prevent that damage and creating an Ash token. Stanislav ends his turn and I use Silken Form's other effect to destroy it and turn an Ash token into an Aether Ashwing. At the start of his turn, Stanislav uses his Goliath Gauntlet to make his next attack that costs 2 or more resources gain 2 attack, and he plays Combustible Courier, which costs 2, and he pitches the yellow Zipper Hit to pay for it, and he attacks me with 6 attack, and I block 3 of them taking 3 damage, and that ends Stanislav's turn. At the start of my turn I play Sigil of Solace from my arsenal, gaining 3 life, and now since I played a red card, all my dragons gain go again. And I use 1 Ash token to create an Asvolai. I attack Dash with Asvolai, dealing 1 arcane damage to both my opponents. Stanislav can't stop it, so his life goes down to 0 and he is eliminated. And the other Stanislav uses Arcane Barrier to prevent that damage, and he blocks Asvolai. Next I attack him with Yendurai, which he also blocks, then with Miragai, which he also blocks, and now with no cards in his hand and no equipment with defense, I attack him with an Ether Ashwing to reduce his life to 0 and eliminate him. And so the Mother of Dragons triumphs over Flame Daddy and a white woman. I hope you enjoyed this little ultimate pit fight, and I'll see you next time. Bye!